At the highest levels of performance, thinking becomes the enemy. When pressure rises, most people do the same thing. They try harder mentally. They analyze more. They monitor themselves more closely. They believe control comes from thought. But under real pressure, that belief collapses. Athletes miss shots they've made 1,000 times. Speakers lose simple sentences. Professionals hesitate on decisions they already know how to make. Skill doesn't disappear. It gets interrupted. For centuries, warriors, monks, and craftsmen recognized a hard truth that modern culture ignores. Peak performance is not created by effortful thinking. It appears when thinking steps aside. In Zen Buddhism and traditional Japanese martial arts, this state is called Mushin. Mushin is often translated as no mind. But that phrase is misleading. Mushin does not mean emptiness or lack of awareness. It means a mind that is present without commentary. No internal narration. No fear-driven evaluation. No ego trying to protect itself. Action happens without delay, because nothing is blocking it. In this state, trained ability expresses itself fully. Samurai were trained in Mushin because hesitation was fatal. There was no time to weigh options or second-guess instincts. The body had to act faster than conscious thought. Mushin was not philosophy. It was survival. When the mind stopped interfering, fear lost its leverage. This wasn't mystical. It was practical discipline. Modern neuroscience points to the same pattern. Under pressure, excessive conscious thinking activates brain regions that slow down automatic, well-trained movements. The more you try to control performance consciously, the more you disrupt it. The mind believes it's helping, but it's stepping into a role it was never meant to play in the moment of action. That's why overthinking ruins performance. Today, this problem is everywhere. People are constantly self-monitoring. Am I doing this right? What if I fail? What does this say about me? The mind never goes quiet, and when the moment matters most, that noise becomes overwhelming. This isn't a motivation issue. This isn't a confidence issue. This is a timing issue. Thinking has its place. Training has its place. Reflection has its place. But performance requires something else entirely. Mushin offers that alternative. Not hype. Not emotional pumping. But a trained calm where action flows without resistance. Where fear fades because the mind is no longer clinging to outcomes. The samurai didn't chase courage. They trained clarity. And that clarity still matters. Because the real question isn't whether you're skilled enough. It's whether your mind will stop interfering when it's time to act. Watch this carefully. This will change how you perform under pressure. Chapter 1. The Story of Hiroshi. Hiroshi was not a beginner. He had skill. He had preparation. He had put in years of quiet work that most people never saw. And yet, when pressure appeared, something went wrong. Not once, not occasionally, consistently. It always followed the same pattern. Before important moments, Hiroshi felt sharp, focused, ready. His body knew what to do. His training was there. But as soon as the moment arrived, competition, presentation, decision, the noise started. Thoughts stacked on top of each other. Small doubts turned into running commentary. His attention split between the task and himself performing the task. That's when things slipped. A movement felt stiff. Timing was off. He hesitated for half a second too long. Not enough for others to notice immediately, but enough to change the outcome. Afterwards, people said things like, "You had it," or "That was close." Hiroshi heard something else. "You froze." He replayed these moments endlessly. What he should have done. What he should have trusted. What went wrong inside his head. He tried to fix it the way most people do. By thinking harder. By analyzing every mistake. By tightening control. It made things worse. The more Hiroshi tried to mentally manage performance, the earlier the noise appeared. Pressure didn't have to be extreme anymore. Even routine situations triggered it. His mind learned to interfere faster than before. Skill didn't save him. Effort didn't save him. Weeks turned into months. The failures weren't dramatic, but they were consistent. Each one chipped away at his confidence. Not in a loud way, in a quiet, corrosive way. He stopped trusting himself under pressure. Others began to notice. Some tried to help. Some offered advice. Relax. Be confident. Stop overthinking. None of it landed. Hiroshi wasn't choosing to overthink. It was happening automatically. That was the most frustrating part. He knew what to do. He just couldn't access it when it mattered. At night, his mind stayed active, replaying moments, anticipating future ones, imagining failure before it even arrived. The body stayed tense long after the situation was over. Overthinking became a habit. And habits don't respond to willpower. Eventually, there was a moment that didn't look like collapse from the outside. No public failure. No confrontation. Just a quiet realization after another missed opportunity. Hiroshi sat alone, not angry, not emotional, just tired. Tired of fighting his own mind. Tired of preparing perfectly and performing inconsistently. Tired of knowing the problem wasn't effort, but not knowing how to remove it. He finally admitted something he'd been avoiding. Trying harder wasn't the solution. Thinking more wasn't the solution. Whatever was blocking him lived inside the space between intention and action. That admission changed the question. Instead of asking, "How do I force better performance?" he asked, "What am I doing mentally that interferes with it?" That shift mattered, because the problem was never lack of ability. It was interference at the moment of execution. A mind that refused to stay quiet when quiet was required. Hiroshi didn't need more confidence. He needed less noise. And for the first time, he stopped searching for motivation, tactics, or reassurance. He began searching for a way to remove himself from the process at the exact moment he kept sabotaging it. That search led him somewhere unexpected. Not to modern performance culture, not to hype or mindset tricks, but to an old idea that claimed the opposite of what he'd been taught. That the mind performs best when it stops trying to perform at all. Hiroshi didn't know it yet, but this was the point where effort gave way to understanding, and where his real training was about to begin. Hiroshi didn't discover the idea while searching for answers. It appeared quietly through a person he almost ignored. The man's name was Masato. He was older, unassuming, and spoke without urgency. No titles. No dramatic backstory, just someone who had spent decades training people under pressure. Athletes, professionals, and fighters who struggled in the same invisible way Hiroshi did. Masato listened more than he spoke. When Hiroshi finally described the problem, the freezing, the noise, the sense of interference, Masato didn't correct him. He didn't offer motivation. He didn't say, "Believe in yourself." He said something simpler. "You're trying to think at the wrong time." Masato introduced the concept slowly, without emphasis, as if naming something obvious. Mushin. He explained that Mushin is often translated as no mind, poetic, but misleading. Mushin doesn't mean emptiness. It doesn't mean shutting the brain off. Functionally, Mushin means a mind that does not interfere with action. No judgment. No commentary. No attachment to outcome. Masato repeated the word again. Mushin. In Zen Buddhism and traditional martial training, Mushin described the state where trained movement flows without conscious obstruction. The body acts. The mind observes, but does not interrupt. Thought exists, but it doesn't lead. Masato told Hiroshi that warriors were taught Mushin not to become fearless, but to become uninterrupted. Fear fades when the mind stops narrating the moment. When there is no inner debate, there is no hesitation. Mushin was not mystical. It was trained. Masato shared a simple anecdote, nothing cinematic. A swordsman practicing the same strike thousands of times. Not to perfect the strike, but to make it unnecessary to think about it. When the moment arrived, the strike happened before thought could form. The mind is useful, Masato said. just not during execution. That sentence stayed with Hiroshi. Masato explained the principle in modern terms. Conscious thinking is slow. Trained patterns are fast. Under pressure, when the mind tries to supervise every movement, it overrides what the body already knows how to do. Performance collapses, not because of fear but because of interference. This was Mushin again. Not confidence, not motivation. Absence of obstruction. Masato looked directly at Hiroshi. Calm is a skill, he said. And like any skill, it's trained. Hiroshi realized something unsettling. He had been training effort, training control, training preparation. But he had never trained non-interference. No one had taught him how to step aside at the exact moment action was required. The idea challenged everything he believed about performance. He asked Masato how long it took to learn Mushin. Masato didn't answer directly. Years, he said. But you start today. He explained that Mushin appears in moments first. Brief flashes where action feels effortless. The work is not forcing those moments, but removing what blocks them. Training the mind to prepare, then release. For the first time, Hiroshi felt relief instead of pressure. The problem wasn't that he lacked discipline. It was that his discipline never included silence. Mushin wasn't about doing more. It was about getting out of the way. Hiroshi didn't feel transformed. He didn't feel confident. He felt something quieter. Clarity. And in that clarity, he understood that everything ahead would be different. Not because he would think better, but because he would learn when not to think at all. This was not the end of his struggle. This was the beginning of his real training. The training didn't begin with confidence. It began with resistance. Hiroshi expected Mushin to feel natural once he understood it. It didn't. The moment he tried to apply it, the same habits appeared. The mind rushed in early. Commentary returned. Control tightened. The difference now was awareness. He could see the interference as it happened, even if he couldn't stop it yet. Masato warned him this would happen. You will notice failure before you experience success, he said. That became the pattern. Chapter 2. Learning to notice in the early weeks. Hiroshi's performance didn't improve. Sometimes it looked worse. The moment pressure arrived, the mind still tried to manage everything. But now, instead of panicking, Hiroshi practiced a single task. Not fixing, not forcing, just noticing. He learned to identify the exact instant the noise began, the subtle tightening, the internal voice that tried to guide every move. Masato told him that Mushin didn't start with silence. It started with recognition. You can't remove what you can't see. Progress was slow, frustrating. But something shifted. Hiroshi stopped judging the failures. He treated them as information. Each interruption showed him where control was sneaking in. The mind still interfered, but it no longer surprised him. Balloon Sorsakor, Chapter 3. Preparation without attachment. Masato changed the training. Preparation became deliberate, focused, exact. But once execution began, Hiroshi was instructed to let go completely. No corrections mid-action. No internal adjustments. Whatever happened, happened. This felt reckless at first. Mistakes occurred. Some were uncomfortable. But Masato refused to intervene. Attachment to outcome is the loudest thought, he said. Hiroshi began to understand. The mind interfered most when it tried to protect results. When he loosened that grip even briefly, moments of flow appeared. Short flashes where action felt smooth, automatic, quiet. They didn't last. But they were real. For the first time, Hiroshi experienced what Mushin felt like in practice. Not perfect, not dramatic, just unobstructed. Those moments became proof. Soar. Chapter 4. The setback then came regression. A high-pressure situation arrived unexpectedly. Hiroshi prepared carefully, believing he had changed. But as soon as the stakes became real, the old patterns returned. Overthinking surged. Control tightened. Performance suffered. The disappointment hit harder than before. Because this time, he knew better. Hiroshi questioned the process, questioned Mushin, questioned himself. Masato didn't rush to reassure him. He let the frustration settle. Then he said something Hiroshi didn't expect. "This is good." Hiroshi didn't understand. Masato explained that progress isn't linear when identity is involved. Old habits defend themselves hardest when they feel threatened. The setback wasn't failure. It was exposure. Your mind is learning that it doesn't run this moment anymore. That reframed everything. Hiroshi returned to training with less urgency and more patience. The goal was no longer to perform well. It was to remain unobstructed. Low, 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 low. Chapter 5. Training stillness under pressure. The months that followed focused on pressure itself. Masato introduced controlled stress. Training stillness under pressure. Observation. Consequences. The point wasn't comfort. It was learning to remain calm when the mind demanded involvement. Hiroshi practiced letting thoughts pass without engagement, not suppressing them, not fighting them, simply refusing to follow them. This was difficult. The mind tried to reclaim control constantly, but Hiroshi learned a new response. Pause, breathe, act, no commentary. Over time, the gap between pressure and interference widened. The mind still spoke, but more softly. Action began to lead again. You've felt this before, even if you didn't know what it was. That moment when everything feels simple. That's not confidence, that's absence of noise. Core. Chapter 6. Small wins. The changes showed up quietly. Hiroshi handled situations that used to trigger him without noticing until afterward. He finished moments without replaying them. He recovered faster when mistakes happened. Others noticed before he did. "You look calm," someone said after a difficult situation. Hiroshi didn't feel calm. He felt neutral. Present. Unoccupied. That mattered. Performance stabilized, not perfect, but consistent. The highs weren't euphoric, the lows weren't devastating. Mushin didn't eliminate difficulty. It removed exaggeration. Skill finally had space to operate. Lois. If this feels familiar, keep watching. This isn't motivation. This is training. Chapter 7. When it counts eventually, the moment arrived that once would have broken him. High pressure. Observation. Stakes. Hiroshi noticed the mind begin to rise. The familiar urge to control, to predict outcomes, to protect identity. He didn't fight it, he let it pass. Action followed without commentary. Movement felt simple. Time felt slower. Not because the moment changed, but because the interference was gone. The result mattered less than the experience. For the first time, Hiroshi trusted himself fully in motion. No hype, no rush, just execution. Reloading store. Chapter 8. Understanding the shift afterward, Masato explained what had happened. Hiroshi hadn't become fearless. Fear still existed. Thoughts still appeared. The difference was authority. Thought no longer led. It followed. Mushin had become reliable. Not constant, but accessible. Hiroshi realized the transformation wasn't dramatic. There was no new personality, no aggressive confidence, just alignment. Preparation happened before. Action happened without interference. This was the discipline. Not doing more, not thinking better, knowing when to step aside. Undergo. Chapter 9. Identity changes quietly over time. Something deeper shifted. Hiroshi stopped identifying as someone who struggled under pressure. Not because he told himself a new story, but because the evidence changed. Repeated experiences rewired expectation. He trusted execution. He trusted silence. Pressure became information, not threat. And when challenges returned, as they always do, he met them differently. Calm first, action second, reflection later. This wasn't mastery, it was alignment. The journey didn't remove difficulty. It removed obstruction. And in that space, Hiroshi discovered what Mushin was never meant to be. Not a state you chase, but a condition you allow. The path forward was clear. Prepare fully. Release completely. Act without interference. The rest no longer mattered. Mushin is not a moment you wait for. It is a condition you train. Most people misunderstand this. They hear no mind and assume it's passive. Relaxation. Letting go. But Mushin only appears after structure. Without a system, silence collapses into chaos. With a system, silence becomes precision. Masato explained it simply. You don't remove the mind entirely, he said. You assign it the correct job. From that idea, the system took shape. Not philosophy, not inspiration. A repeatable method. Masato called it the Mushin execution system. And it rested on 4 pillars. Go low. Go low. Pillar 1. Preparation without commentary. The first pillar happens before pressure. Preparation is where thinking belongs. Planning. Repetition. Refinement. This is where the mind earns its authority. But most people carry preparation into execution, where it becomes interference. In the Mushin execution system, preparation is deliberate and contained. You prepare fully. Then you stop. No rehearsing during action. No mental corrections mid-performance. The work is done ahead of time so the body can act without supervision. This is where many people fail. They never close the preparation phase. They drag it into the moment and wonder why everything feels tight. Busor. Another whore. Busor. Pillar 2. Presence over control under pressure. The brain searches for certainty. It tries to control outcomes by monitoring every move. Neuroscience explains why this backfires. Conscious control relies on slower neural pathways. Trained skills rely on faster automatic ones. When conscious control steps in too late, it overrides speed with hesitation. The Mushin execution system trains presence instead of control. Presence means attention without evaluation. You notice what's happening, but you don't narrate it. Thoughts can appear, but they don't lead. Ask yourself this. When pressure hits, do you observe, or do you interfere? Kalo. Pillar 3. Action without attachment. This pillar is where Mushin becomes visible. Attachment is the mind-gripping results, identity, approval. Avoiding failure. The moment attachment appears, the mind reclaims control. The system trains release. You act without negotiating with outcomes. Success and failure are processed later. During execution, they don't exist. This doesn't remove responsibility. It removes distortion. Performance becomes cleaner when the mind stops protecting the ego mid-action. This is Mushin applied correctly. Pillar 4. Pillar 4. Reflection after completion. Reflection is essential, but timing matters. Most people reflect during performance, which creates self-consciousness. In the Mushin execution system, reflection happens only after completion. Afterward, you analyze, you learn, you adjust. Calmly, objectively. Then you prepare again. This loop is critical. Without reflection, there's no growth. Without delay, there's no Mushin. Why people fail to enter Mushin. Most people try to skip the system and chase the state. They want calm without preparation, flow without discipline, silence without structure. That never works. Mushin is not relaxation. It's alignment. When thinking is placed in the wrong phase, it becomes sabotage. When it's placed correctly, it disappears naturally. The Mushin execution system works because it respects how the brain actually functions. Preparation uses conscious thought. Execution relies on trained patterns. Reflection integrates learning. Each phase has a role. Each phase has boundaries. Applying this immediately, you don't need years to start. Choose one situation this week where pressure usually interferes. Prepare fully. Then commit to one rule during execution: no commentary. Thoughts may appear, Let them pass. Return attention to the action. Reflect afterward. That's it. Mushin doesn't arrive with intensity. It arrives with quiet consistency. And the more often you apply the system, the more reliable Mushin becomes. Not as a rare peak, but as your default under pressure. This is mastery. Not forcing performance, but finally getting out of its way. The change didn't announce itself. There was no sudden confidence, no dramatic moment where everything clicked. What changed first was response. Situations that once triggered tension now passed without escalation. The same pressure appeared, but it no longer controlled him. Hiroshi noticed it after the fact. Moments ended, and his mind stayed quiet. Challenges still carried weight. Stakes were still real. But the familiar internal struggle, the urge to control, to anticipate failure, to manage perception, lost its urgency. Mushin didn't remove difficulty. It removed the excess meaning attached to it. Old patterns tried to return. High-pressure situations have memory. They test whether change is real. When familiar stress resurfaced, Hiroshi felt the mind rise again, ready to interfere. But now, he recognized it instantly, not as a threat, as noise. He didn't suppress it. He didn't argue with it. He returned attention to the action and let the mind follow instead of lead. That difference mattered. Results became consistent, not perfect but stable. Mistakes happened without spirals. Success arrived without emotional spikes. Performance stopped swinging between extremes. Others noticed. "You don't rush anymore," someone said. Another remarked on how composed he seemed during moments that unsettled everyone else. Hiroshi didn't feel composed, he felt present. There was no internal drama to manage. That was the transformation. Social recognition followed quietly. Trust increased. Responsibility expanded. Not because he demanded it, but because calm under pressure is visible. People sense when someone isn't negotiating with fear in real time. The biggest shift wasn't external. It was identity. Hiroshi stopped seeing himself as someone who hopes to perform well under pressure. He became someone who expects clarity first. Not because he believed in himself, but because repetition had proven something reliable. Mushin wasn't a rare state anymore. It was accessible. Thoughts still appeared. Fear still surfaced. But they no longer dictated behavior. Execution happened cleanly, and reflection happened later. The roles stayed separate. When challenges returned, as they always do, Hiroshi met them differently. Calm before action. Action without commentary. Reflection without judgment. The loop held. He understood something important. Transformation wasn't about becoming fearless. It was about removing the need to negotiate with fear. Mushin didn't make him extraordinary. It made him consistent. And consistency, under pressure, is what separates potential from reliability. The journey didn't end here. But the struggle that once defined him did. Because when the mind learns when to step aside, performance no longer feels fragile. It feels inevitable. Performance was never the problem. Effort was never the problem. The problem was interference. Most people believe success under pressure comes from adding something. More confidence, more motivation, more control. But Hiroshi's journey revealed the opposite truth. What limits performance isn't what's missing. It's what's in the way. The mind is powerful, but timing matters. Thinking is essential for preparation. Reflection is essential for growth. But execution lives in a narrow window where thinking becomes disruptive. When the mind insists on supervising action in real time, it fractures attention. It turns skill into hesitation. This is why so many capable people fail in moments that matter. They don't lack ability. They lack silence. Mushin was never about becoming calm in general. It was about placing calm exactly where it belongs. Calm before action. Absence of commentary during action. Thought after completion. That order changes everything. Hiroshi's story is not unique. It's structural. Anyone who has trained seriously has felt this tension, the gap between what they know they can do and what actually shows up under pressure. The gap isn't filled with belief. It's closed by removing obstruction. When the mind stops protecting identity mid-action, fear loses its leverage. When outcomes stop being negotiated in real time, execution becomes clean. Performance stabilizes not because circumstances improve, but because internal noise no longer dictates behavior. This applies beyond performance. Difficult conversations, high-stakes decisions, moments of confrontation. The same rule holds. Prepare fully, then step aside. Let action unfold without commentary. Stillness is not passivity. It is discipline. Mushin is not emptiness. It is alignment, and alignment is what allows trained skill to surface reliably, without force. The truth is simple. You don't need to become someone else. You don't need to add intensity. You need to remove interference. That is where clarity lives. That is where performance becomes dependable. And that is where the mind finally learns its most important role. To know when to lead, and when to get out of the way. Mushin is not something you summon. It's something you return to. Again and again. Under pressure, when it matters. The work is not dramatic. There is no finish line, no permanent state where effort disappears forever. There is only practice, placing the mind where it belongs and removing it from where it doesn't. Preparation stays deliberate. Execution stays clean. Reflection stays honest. When those boundaries hold, performance stops feeling fragile. You don't wait to feel ready. You don't negotiate with fear. You act and deal with results afterward. That is the discipline. Before the moment arrives, you train. When the moment arrives, you release. After the moment passes, you learn. Nothing more. Nothing less. This is how clarity survives pressure. This is how skill becomes dependable. This is how effort finally pays off. Remember this, not as an idea, as a rule. Kalo anko. No commentary, no hesitation, just execution. Kalo, nakar anko, kalo ango naral sisma kalo karls kalo kalor sor. If you want to train this mindset further, to apply it consistently under real pressure, subscribe and keep training with us.